"There's something breathing back there, and it's not the puppy!" I shouted, backing away from the couch like it had bitten me. It all started 3 weeks after I adopted Murphy. He was a floppy-eared golden retriever pup with paws too big for his own good, and a tail that wagged with the intensity of a windshield wiper on full speed. I'd never had a dog before, but after losing both my parents in the span of 2 years, the silence in the house had grown too loud. I needed life. I needed a reason to get up each day. That's how Murphy came into my world. I got him from a small rescue shelter out in Asheville, about 40 minutes from my place in Roanoke. He was the last of his litter, shy and hiding in the corner of the kennel while the others barked and jumped at passers-by. Something about his quiet demeanor tugged at me. He didn't need to jump to get my attention. He already had it. The shelter volunteer told me he hadn't been very social after they brought him in. But he was healthy, eating well, and just needed some time. Our first week together was full of cautious steps and uncertain sniffs. Murphy spent a lot of time under the table or tucked behind the armchair. It wasn't until day 4 that he let me pet him without flinching. By the end of week 2, he was wagging his tail when I came home, and even brought me one of his chew toys, a plush duck missing an eye. But then he started hiding behind the couch. It was odd. He hadn't been interested in that spot at all until that Monday. At first I thought he was just exploring. Then it became a pattern. He would eat breakfast, play for a bit, then trot over to the living room and squeeze himself between the couch and the wall. No amount of coaxing, treats, or silly voices would pull him out until he was ready. Sometimes it took 10 minutes. Sometimes an hour. At first, I assumed he was retreating there because it made him feel safe. But then he started staring back at the wall while he was back there, ears perked, tail stiff, body tense. That wasn't a nap pose. That was alertness. 3 days ago, I decided to investigate. I pulled the couch away from the wall slowly, expecting to find maybe an old toy, a forgotten dog treat, or worst case, a mouse nest. But instead, I found nothing. Not a crumb, not a dust bunny, just the plain, off-white paint of the wall and a slightly scuffed baseboard. Murphy barked sharply the moment I moved the couch. He darted forward, planted himself in front of the opening, and refused to let me push it all the way back. Yesterday, the barking started. At first it was soft, just low rumbles. But then, it escalated into full-on growling. He stood back there like a little sentinel, eyes focused on the wall as if waiting for something. This morning, things got even weirder. Murphy began pawing at the wall. Repeatedly, with purpose. And then came the whine, high-pitched, almost like he was pleading. I knelt down next to him, rubbed his side, and said, "Buddy, what is it? What are you looking at?" Then I put my ear to the wall. That's when I heard it. The faintest rustling. Not the creaks of an old house. This was softer, deliberate. And then a breath. I shot up like a spring and stumbled back. "There's something breathing back there, and it's not the puppy!" I called the vet first. I wasn't going to call the police over a wall, and I figured if Murphy was reacting this strongly, maybe there was a scent. An animal or something trapped in the insulation? Dr. Gentry was kind enough to squeeze us in for the afternoon. I brought Murphy in, explained everything I'd seen and heard, and even recorded the sound from the wall using my phone. She listened carefully, brows furrowed. "Let's run a check on Murphy, just in case. But from the behavior you're describing, it sounds like he's sensing something living. Not necessarily dangerous, but definitely alive." Murphy got a clean bill of health, and Dr. Gentry agreed to come over the next day to see the house herself. "I'll bring a snake scope and some thermal tools, just in case. Could be a raccoon or a possum. You'd be surprised where those critters can squeeze into. I barely slept that night. I kept one ear tuned to the living room, flinching at every creak and squeak. Murphy stood guard again, this time refusing to eat dinner. He paced, tail stiff, eyes glued to the wall. When Dr. Gentry arrived, she brought along her assistant, Mike. We moved the couch, and Murphy immediately darted behind it and barked. "All right," she said. "Let's see what you've got for us, buddy." She slid a thermal camera across the wall first. "Huh," she muttered. "There's a cold pocket here. Odd shape, like a vent or a crawl space, maybe?" "There's no crawl space there," I said. "That wall backs into the garage." Mike went outside to check from the other side. He knocked, then shouted, "There's a little access panel here. You got a key or a latch for this?" I blinked. "I've lived here 6 years. I've never noticed a panel." We opened it together. It was a small square door, probably no more than 2 feet tall, hidden behind a shelf stacked with old paint cans. Inside, a narrow passage led between the walls. It was dusty and tight, too small for a person, but maybe just right for a critter. Murphy was scratching frantically now. Dr. Gentry turned to Mike. "I'm sending in the scope." The snake camera fed images to her tablet. For the first few feet, it was just wood and cobwebs. Then, something moved. We all held our breath. A bundle of fur. Matted, small, shivering. Dr. Gentry gasped. "It's another puppy." My heart stopped. Murphy barked once, loudly, then whined. The little creature on the screen tried to scoot away from the light, but it was weak, barely able to move. "We need to get in there," she said. "Now." It took 30 minutes to clear a wider opening, but eventually Mike reached in and pulled the bundle out. It was a tiny black and tan mix, trembling, with a thin rope tied loosely around its back leg. Dr. Gentry worked fast, checking vitals, cleaning its eyes, wrapping it in a blanket. "She's dehydrated and malnourished, but alive. I don't think she's been in there too long, maybe a few days. Thank God Murphy found her." I stared at the tiny dog in disbelief. "How did she get in there?" Mike shrugged. "Could have been dumped. Maybe someone thought your garage would be a good hiding spot, but she wouldn't have survived much longer." Murphy sat beside me, still alert, but now his tail gave a slow wag. He looked at the new puppy, then at me. Like he was saying, "Told you." Dr. Gentry smiled. "You've got yourself a little hero, you know that?" I reached down and scratched behind Murphy's ears. "Yeah, I do now." But even as I held the rescued puppy close, questions buzzed in the back of my mind. Who left her there? And why? The answers would come later. For now, Murphy had saved a life, and mine had just changed all over again. I wasn't ready for how much noise one tiny puppy could make. The little black and tan mix we rescued from the wall had a set of lungs on her that would have made a foghorn proud. She whined through her first night in a high-pitched warble that woke me every 40 minutes. Murphy, in contrast, stayed silent but alert, lying at the foot of the couch like he was back on guard duty. Dr. Gentry had left us with special feeding instructions, antibiotics, and a reminder to keep the new puppy warm and isolated at first. She also promised to follow up in a couple days and check her over again. For the time being, I made a cozy little space in a laundry basket padded with towels and placed it in the corner of the living room. The same room she'd been hiding behind the wall. Murphy sniffed her gently when we brought her in. No growling, no jealously. Just a curious, almost protective stance as she squirmed in my arms. When I set her down to drink from a tiny dish of water, he sat close by, eyes never leaving her. She didn't have a name yet. I didn't want to rush that. A name should fit, and I wanted to give it time. Right now, she needed to rest, eat, and recover. But that didn't mean things were quiet. She cried when she was alone, even for a moment. If I stepped out to the kitchen, she wailed. If I took Murphy out for a short walk, she shrieked. The only time she seemed remotely content was when I sat close enough for her to see me, and Murphy sat even closer. The two of us, apparently, had been deputized into her recovery squad. By the second day, she was eating better. Tiny amounts, several times a day, just as the vet instructed. Her little body still looked thin and shaky, but she wagged her tail once when I reached into her basket to pet her. It wasn't much, but it was something. Murphy continued to watch her like a furry sentinel. He brought her toys, his duck, a small blue ball, even his favorite rope. She didn't quite know what to do with them, but she sniffed them with interest. That seemed to be enough for him. And for me, it was heart-melting. By the end of the week, I started sleeping in the living room. My bedroom felt too far. It didn't feel right to leave her on her own while she was still whimpering at every creak in the house. I set up a sleeping bag and a pillow on the rug, with Murphy curled up beside me, and the little basket not far from my head. The first night I did that, she didn't cry. On Saturday morning, I took both dogs to Dr. Gentry's clinic for the follow-up appointment. I had to borrow a friend's pet carrier to transport the new pup. She shook the entire car ride, but once we got into the exam room and Murphy licked her nose, she calmed down. Dr. Gentry gave me a kind smile. "She's already looking better. You've done good, both of you." She ran through her checkup carefully. "Weight's up a little. Temperature's normal. Lungs are clearer. We'll keep her on antibiotics another week, but I'm hopeful." I felt a small weight lift off my shoulders. There was still a long road ahead, but she was getting stronger. After the appointment, we stopped by the pet store. I bought a second set of food bowls, a few soft toys, and a new bed. Smaller than Murphy's, but every bit as plush. Murphy got a treat and a chew stick, which he immediately tried to carry along with his duck in his mouth. Back home, I rearranged the living room to accommodate both of them. Murphy's corner stayed the same, but I set up the smaller bed next to mine near the couch. That night, I woke up to the soft sound of paws. Murphy had nudged his duck into the new puppy's bed and curled up beside her. I lay there watching them for a long time, heart so full it ached. The next few days felt like a new rhythm taking shape. Murphy stayed close to the puppy, whose energy began to return in small bursts. She still wobbled when she walked, but she could now follow Murphy in slow circles around the rug. She started sniffing his tail and nibbling at his ear, which Murphy tolerated with the patience of a saint. Then came the morning she barked. It wasn't much, just a single sharp yip, like she was testing out the sound. Murphy lifted his head and tilted it, clearly amused. I laughed out loud. "Getting brave now, huh?" I asked her. Murphy nuzzled her side and laid his head down again. I started thinking about names more seriously. Something gentle. Something that fit her tiny frame and big heart. On a walk that afternoon, the answer came to me when we passed a little girl selling lemonade. She pointed at the puppy in my arms and said, "She looks like a Tilly." Tilly. That was it. Sweet, warm, and hopeful. It felt just right. That evening, I said it aloud for the first time. "Hey there, Tilly." The puppy wagged her tail. Slowly, but she wagged it. From then on, she was Tilly, and I think Murphy approved. By the following week, Tilly was strong enough to walk short distances on her own. I started letting her explore the backyard with Murphy during the day, watching closely to make sure she didn't get overwhelmed. She sniffed at grass, pawed at leaves, and barked a little more each day. Murphy stayed by her side, occasionally running ahead to chase a squirrel, but always circling back to check on her. Neighbors began to notice. Mr. Garrett, who lived 2 doors down, leaned over the fence one afternoon and said, "You got yourself a pack now, huh?" I smiled. "Yeah, guess I do." "Good dogs," he said, tipping his hat. "Real good dogs." Tilly's trust grew in stages. She let me pick her up without trembling now. She sought out Murphy when she was scared, but she also started nudging my hand for attention. The first time she climbed into my lap and fell asleep there, I almost cried. But there were still mysteries lingering. I kept thinking about that crawl space, about how she got in there, who put her there, and why she had a rope around her leg. One afternoon, I took a closer look at the garage. The access panel was still there, now sealed and locked. I moved the shelf away again, crouched, and ran my hand along the interior. No signs of forced entry, no scratch marks, just an empty space. But then I noticed a small scrap of fabric tucked behind one of the paint cans. I pulled it free. It was a corner of a torn bandana, red with a white paisley pattern. It smelled faintly of smoke and something else I couldn't place. I set it aside for later. Back inside, Tilly barked once, then climbed onto the couch for the first time. Murphy jumped up after her and plopped beside her with a thump. I sat across from them, watching the 2 dogs rest side by side. The house no longer felt quiet. It buzzed with life now. Sniffs, rustles, tail thumps, and the occasional squeaky toy. The silence that used to echo through the hallways had been replaced by something new, something better. I didn't have all the answers yet, but I knew one thing for sure. Tilly had found us for a reason, or maybe Murphy had found her for a reason. Either way, this little family of ours was only just beginning. 3 days after finding that torn red bandana in the garage, I found a shoe print in the mulch beside my fence. It was subtle, almost washed out by the rain from earlier in the week, but it hadn't been there before. I knew because I'd planted a small patch of begonias next to the fence line, and I checked on them every morning. Now, one of the blooms had been crushed, and next to it was a partial impression of a boot heel. Tilly barked when I stepped closer. She was still too small to be outside unsupervised, but I had brought her out for some fresh air while Murphy chased birds across the yard. Her body stiffened as I studied the print. She edged closer to Murphy, then turned to face the direction of the woods behind our house. My place backed up to a thin strip of forest that eventually led to a service road. There weren't many people who had reason to walk back there. The few neighbors I had were either retirees or rarely home. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the shoe print. The next morning, I drove into town and bought a basic outdoor camera system. Nothing fancy, just a motion-activated camera and a weatherproof casing. I mounted it near the back corner of the house, angled toward the fence line. I didn't tell anyone, not yet. Murphy watched me the whole time, tail wagging once in a while like he was checking on my work. Tilly sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, her little nose twitching at every gust of wind. By now she had gained enough strength to walk without wobbling, though she still tired easily. I kept her on a short leash while Murphy roamed freely. The two of them had developed a rhythm that looked a lot like older brother and younger sister. He'd race ahead, she'd try to follow, and when she couldn't keep up, he'd circle back and gently bump her along. A week after the bandana discovery, the camera caught something. I almost missed it. The video feed wasn't set up to alert my phone automatically, so I had to manually check the saved clips each day. That morning, I sat at the table with a cup of coffee, scrolling through the night's footage. Raccoon. Stray cat. Nothing unusual. Then I saw it. 2:47 a.m. A figure appeared at the edge of the woods. Too far for facial details, but close enough to see a man. Medium build. Wearing a hoodie. He stood there for a full minute. Just staring at the fence. Then he turned and disappeared into the trees. I called the sheriff's office that afternoon. Not to panic, just to report. Deputy Sanders came by, took a look at the footage, and made some notes. "Could be someone camping out," he said. "Sometimes folks wander through these woods thinking it's still public land. I'll drive the loop, see if I spot anyone. You let me know if you see him again." Murphy growled once as the deputy walked back to his car. That night, I locked every door and window, even the small ones I usually left cracked for air. Tilly slept next to me on the couch, curled into a tight ball. Murphy didn't sleep. He sat by the front door, ears perked, waiting. Days passed. No new footage, no prints, no signs of anyone. But something had shifted. I could feel it. Murphy did too. He didn't play as much. He stayed close to Tilly all day, followed me from room to room. He only relaxed when all three of us were in the same place. Dr. Gentry came by to check on Tilly again. She brought more vitamins and some better food now that Tilly was strong enough for solid meals. "You're doing great with her," she said, scratching Tilly's ears. "She's growing fast." "I wish I knew more about where she came from," I said. Dr. Gentry nodded. "You might never know. But you gave her a second chance. That's what matters." After she left, I sat on the porch with Murphy and Tilly, watching the sunset. The sky turned orange, then pink, then purple. A breeze picked up, and the trees rustled gently. That's when Murphy stood up and stared toward the woods. I followed his gaze. Nothing. But he didn't move for 5 minutes. That night, I moved the sleeping setup upstairs to my room. I brought both dogs with me and closed the door tight. I didn't want them alone downstairs, not while my gut kept twisting with unease. 3 days later, Tilly barked at the front door. It was early morning. I was pouring kibble when she suddenly bolted to the entrance and let out a sharp, urgent yip. Murphy followed instantly, blocking her path with his body. I rushed over. Outside on the porch was a cardboard box. Murphy growled. Tilly whined. I opened the door slowly and pulled the box inside. Inside it was a torn dog collar, another scrap of red bandana, and a note. "She was supposed to die in that wall." My hands shook. No signature, no explanation, just that single sentence. I locked the door and called Deputy Sanders again. He came within the hour, took the note, took the box, asked 100 questions I didn't have answers to. He posted a patrol car nearby and gave me his personal number. That night, Murphy didn't leave the door. I placed Tilly between 2 pillows on the couch and sat beside her, one hand on her back, the other gripping the phone. No sleep. The next day, I drove to every vet, shelter, and rescue center in a 30-mile radius, showed Tilly's photo, asked questions. Most said no. A few took her photo to check their records. Finally, at a small animal clinic north of town, A receptionist paused when I showed her the image. "That looks like a puppy we saw 3 weeks ago," she said. "A man brought her in, said she was a stray, gave a fake name and address. We didn't know until the paperwork bounced, but we had his license plate. I can call the officer who filed the report." Hope surged. Real, tangible hope. Back home, I told Murphy first. "We might find out where she came from. Who did this?" He wagged his tail, but didn't take his eyes off the door. Tilly was stronger every day now. She ran in short bursts, barked more often, and followed Murphy like a shadow. But she still flinched at loud noises, still stared too long at the windows. 2 days after my trip to the clinic, Deputy Sanders returned. "We got an ID," he said. "Man's name is Dale Kettering. Trouble with the law before. Animal neglect, trespassing, loitering. We think he might be living out of his truck. We're looking for him." He paused. "We think he knew the wall led to the garage. Probably snuck in through the service road and left her there deliberately." I couldn't breathe for a moment. "Why?" "We don't know. Could be cruelty. Could be a grudge against the previous owner. But we'll find him. And he won't be coming back." Murphy and Tilly sat side by side on the rug as the deputy left. The house felt heavier now. The threat wasn't just imagined. It had a name. That night, I let both dogs sleep in the bed with me. Tilly curled into my chest. Murphy laid across my legs. I didn't move once. Neither did they. By morning, the world looked brighter. No signs of Dale, no new notes, no disturbances. Tilly played in the yard with Murphy for nearly half an hour straight. She rolled in the grass, chased a butterfly, and even tried to tug on his rope toy. For the first time, she barked just to bark. That afternoon, we went for a short drive. I needed to pick up a new bag of dog food, and I thought Tilly might like the ride. Murphy sat in the back seat with her, his head resting gently on her shoulder. At the store, an older woman walked up to us and said, "What beautiful dogs." "Thank you," I said. "They saved each other, really." Tilly licked her hand. Murphy sat like a statue, proud and calm. We headed home with the windows down, the air warm and fresh. Back at the house, I checked the footage one more time. Nothing. Maybe Dale was gone, maybe he'd moved on, but I wasn't letting my guard down yet. Murphy stayed by the door. Tilly rested in her bed, and I sat at the window, watching the trees sway. The story wasn't over. But we were ready for whatever came next. 3 nights later, I woke up to the sound of Murphy barking. Not his usual alert bark. This was short, sharp, frantic. My heart jumped before my eyes even opened. I sat up, scanning the room, only to realize Murphy wasn't in the room. Neither was Tilly. I rushed down the hallway. Their barking, now both of them, echoed through the house. The sounds came from the garage. I fumbled with the hallway light, grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the stairs, and threw open the door leading to the garage. Murphy was there, his body pressed against the wall where the crawlspace access panel used to be. Tilly was beside him, growling. The wall was undisturbed, but something had set them off. I moved closer, heart hammering. "Murphy? What is it?" He looked up at me once, then turned back to the wall. Tilly barked again. Nothing moved. Nothing stirred. I listened for minutes, but heard no breathing this time. No footsteps. Just the hum of the fridge in the corner and the faint creak of the rafters. Eventually, I coaxed both dogs back inside, checking every door and window again before returning to bed. They refused to leave my side the rest of the night. In the morning, I called Deputy Sanders again. He didn't dismiss it, but he couldn't do much without new evidence. "We're still looking for Dale," he said. "We haven't had another sighting since that porch box. It's possible he's moved on, but keep that camera on. Keep them close." I did. The next few days passed in a tense calm. I took Murphy and Tilly everywhere I could. Grocery trips, long walks around the neighborhood, even short errands to the post office. The only time I left them behind was during work meetings, and even then I asked a neighbor to check in every few hours. Tilly was growing fast. Her ribs weren't as visible anymore, and she was learning commands quickly. She already knew sit, stay, and leave it, though she only obeyed leave it when she was in the mood. Murphy, of course, remained the gold standard of discipline and patience. One quiet Thursday morning, I decided to take them both on a trail walk near Deerbridge Creek. The local state park had a pet-friendly loop that circled a shallow stream and curved around a patch of pines. Murphy loved the water. Tilly had never seen it. She approached the edge cautiously, sniffing the wet stones. Murphy pranced right in, sending little splashes in every direction. After a few uncertain minutes, Tilly took a step in, then another. She paddled for a few seconds before scrambling back, shaking her body with exaggerated shivers. I laughed. They spent almost an hour running between trees, investigating fallen logs and digging through piles of leaves. Tilly barked at a squirrel once and then tripped over a root trying to chase it. Murphy stayed near the trail, glancing back every few steps to make sure she was following. By the time we got home, both dogs were caked in mud. I gave them a bath out back, which neither of them appreciated, though Tilly accepted it better than Murphy, who sulked until dinner. That night, after they were dry and fed, I sat down with the printout I'd made of Dale Kettering's arrest record. Sanders had provided it with a warning. "Don't go digging into him on your own. Let us handle it." But I needed to understand, not to chase him, just to make sense of it. His record stretched back 12 years. Most of it was non-violent: illegal camping, failure to appear in court, minor theft. But 2 years ago, there was a charge that stuck out: animal cruelty. He'd been found living behind an abandoned warehouse with a dozen dogs, all underweight. He'd served 3 months and disappeared after release. No known family, no address, nothing else. I put the paper down and looked at Murphy and Tilly sleeping by the fire. They were my family now. The next day brought a shift in routine. Murphy started sleeping closer to the front door again. Tilly began barking at the windows more often, even when nothing was outside. I tightened their leashes on walks and double-checked every camera angle. Then the note arrived. It wasn't in a box this time. It was taped to my front gate. A small strip of yellowed paper, written in the same messy block letters. "I see she's still breathing." My stomach dropped. I looked around immediately, heart pounding, but the street was empty. No footprints, no noise. I brought it inside, scanned the footage, and sure enough, at 4:02 a.m., a figure approached the gate, taped the note, and walked away. Hood up. No face visible. Deputy Sanders came again, took the note, reviewed the footage, and increased patrols around the neighborhood. "If you see him, call immediately," he said. "Don't confront, don't wait. We're going to find him." But I couldn't just wait. That afternoon, I drove back to the animal clinic where Tilly had once been dropped off. The same receptionist was there. When I told her about the note, she frowned. "There's something else you should know," she said. "The day that man brought her in, he argued with one of our techs, said the puppy didn't listen. He called her a mistake. When we said we'd keep her and try to find a home, he changed his mind, said never mind, took her back. But he brought her again later?" She shook her head. No, that was the only time we saw him. We thought he'd dumped her somewhere else. So she'd been taken back. And then hidden in a wall, left to die. But why go to the trouble? Why not abandon her elsewhere? Why behind my wall? The only connection I could think of was the house itself. I pulled up old records from the property file. Prior owners. Renovation history. One name jumped out. Marcus Kettering. Dale's brother. He'd sold the house 8 years ago. Moved out of state. That was the link. Maybe Dale had come back, looking for something. Maybe he thought the house still belonged to his family. And when he found it didn't, he'd left Tilly behind, maybe as some twisted act of resentment. I told Deputy Sanders about the connection. He agreed to look into Marcus and see if he'd had any contact with Dale. In the meantime, I changed all the locks on the house. That night, Tilly woke me up by licking my face. Murphy was standing at the window, growling. The camera had caught movement. A figure again, this time standing closer to the edge of the woods. Not approaching the gate, just watching. The fear was constant now, but I refused to let it rule us. Tilly deserved to grow up without that shadow. Murphy deserved peace. And I wasn't about to lose either of them, so I started training. Not the dogs, me. I enrolled in a weekend self-defense course at the rec center. I met with a security consultant and installed a second layer of cameras and motion detectors around the perimeter. I even ordered new floodlights triggered by sound. It wasn't paranoia, it was protection. The more secure the house became, the more the dogs relaxed. Murphy returned to napping in his usual spots. Tilly barked less. Even started playing fetch with enthusiasm instead of nervous glances over her shoulder. One morning, she brought me her rope toy, tail wagging. We'd come a long way, but the story wasn't over. I still didn't know where Dale was. I still didn't know what else he might try. And every time I looked at Tilly, I was reminded that her life had nearly been lost in silence. Not anymore. When I walked into the living room and found Tilly pawing at the front door, something in my chest tightened. It wasn't her usual bark for attention or I need to go out whimper. This was a persistent scratch, steady and rhythmic, her eyes fixed on the doorknob as if she expected it to turn. Murphy was a few steps behind her, watching silently, his body tensed in that way I'd come to recognize. He wasn't alarmed yet, but he was ready. I peeked through the window. Nothing. No movement on the street. No cars parked differently. No figures near the gate. Still, I stepped outside and made a slow circle around the house, checked the cameras, reviewed the footage. Nothing out of place. But Tilly didn't calm down for hours. That night, I sat on the couch with her in my lap, and Murphy stretched across my feet. I held the same red bandana scrap from the garage in one hand. I couldn't stop wondering what it meant. Who tied it to her leg? Why it matched the one that came in the box. The next day, I made a decision. I called Marcus Kettering. His number was listed under the property's previous deed records, and I wasn't even sure it would still be valid. But after 3 rings, someone answered. "This is Marcus," a voice said. Low, gravelly, unsure. "Hi, my name is Nate. I'm calling because I live in your old house in Roanoke. Look, I know this is going to sound strange, but I think your brother might have left something here. Something dangerous." There was a pause, a long one. Then finally, "You found the crawl space." My heart skipped. Yes, I found a puppy in there. Alive, just barely. And then notes started showing up. Threats. Another pause. "I never told Dale I sold the place," Marcus said slowly. "We weren't close, not really. But he used to come by even after I moved. I guess I figured if I just ignored him long enough, he'd disappear again. He didn't. I didn't think he'd hurt anything, Marcus went on. He always had dogs, always talked about how they were better than people, but he didn't treat them right. Didn't know how. Do you have any idea why he would have left her in the wall? There was a creak on the other end. Maybe a chair. Maybe just Marcus shifting his weight. He used to talk about training the right way. No distractions, no noise, total obedience. I think he thought isolation would make them loyal. He tried to train her by trapping her? I don't know, Marcus said. I just know he was broken. I'm sorry he came back. I really am. I ended the call more shaken than I expected. So Dale wasn't just cruel. He was deliberate. He thought he was doing something necessary. Or worse, something right. I held Tilly tighter that night. Over the following days, I doubled down on normalcy. Structure. Calm. Morning walks. Evening fetch. New toys. Tilly responded with growing energy and curiosity. She started exploring rooms without Murphy by her side. She barked at the vacuum and then chased it like it was her sworn enemy. She stole one of my socks and proudly paraded it around the house. Murphy, as always, watched her like an old soul. He let her chew on his ears, tug on his tail, climb onto his back when she got too excited to sit still. I swear he smiled when she tried to take a toy from him and fell over backwards in the attempt. Then, one afternoon, the phone rang. "Sanders here," the deputy said. "We picked him up." It took a second to process. "Dale? Caught him about 10 miles outside of town, trying to break into an abandoned trailer. He's in custody now. Thought you'd want to know." I sank into a chair, letting the air out of my lungs slowly. "Will there be charges?" "For the trespassing, yes. As for the notes and the puppy, it'll take some time. But the judge is reviewing everything. We'll keep you updated." I thanked him, hung up, and looked at the two dogs dozing on the rug. Tilly opened one eye, then the other. Ears flicking forward. "He's gone," I whispered. I didn't expect Tilly to understand, but she climbed into my lap anyway. Still, relief didn't come all at once. The house didn't feel safe overnight. I still checked the locks, still checked the cameras, still looked over my shoulder walking to the mailbox. But day by day, the weight lessened. 1 week after Dale's arrest, I got a letter. Handwritten. No return address. Inside was a photograph. An old one. A small puppy, maybe Tilly. Wrapped in the same red bandana. Sitting on a porch. A second dog beside her. Larger. Yellow-brown. It looked like Murphy. And on the back, a single line. "You took what was mine. You can keep it. She chose you." I burned the photo. That night I took Tilly and Murphy to the park. It was a warm spring evening, and the air was filled with the sounds of kids playing, bikes rolling, and distant traffic. We found a bench near the fountain and just sat. Murphy watched the ducks. Tilly tried to chew on the leash handle. A little boy passed us and waved. "That's the puppy from the grocery store," he said to his mom. "The one that kissed me." Tilly barked once and wagged her tail. The mom laughed. "Looks like she remembers you." Later that week, I enrolled her in basic training classes. Not because she needed strict obedience, she didn't, but because I wanted her to be around other dogs, other people, and feel safe. She took to it fast. The instructor commented on her confidence, her awareness, her spirit. "She's a survivor," I said simply. By the end of the month, she could heel without a leash. Sit and stay even with distractions. Come when called every single time. Murphy still led the way, but now she followed not out of fear, but because she wanted to. The town held a dog fair in early June. Booths, games, treats, a little agility course. I signed up both dogs just for fun. Murphy aced the course on the first try. Tilly took her time, got distracted by the tunnel, barked at the balance beam, and then zoomed through the last section with her ears flying. We didn't win anything, but the applause when she crossed the finish line, ears up, tail wagging, body strong, meant more than any ribbon. I kept the schedule tight and steady. We woke with the sun, walked after breakfast, trained in the afternoons, cuddled in the evenings. I stopped waking up to check the doors, stopped carrying the bat down the hallway. The fear didn't vanish, but it faded. Tilly had been meant to disappear in silence, but she didn't. She made noise, she barked, she played, she lived, and I was beginning to as well. The first thunderstorm of summer rolled in with barely any warning. One minute I was watering the potted herbs on the back deck, while Murphy and Tilly played tug-of-war with a knotted rope. The next, the sky had turned a deep slate gray, and the wind picked up so quickly that Tilly dropped the rope mid-tug and whimpered. Murphy, as usual, stayed calm. He never flinched during storms, but Tilly backed toward the door, tail low, ears pinned back. Her body trembled as the first rumble shook the clouds. I rushed over and scooped her up. "Come on, sweetheart. It's just noise." Inside, the storm cracked open the sky. Rain pelted the windows. Lightning lit the living room in bursts. Tilly scrambled from my arms and wedged herself behind the couch again, the exact spot where I first found her, days after she came into our lives. Murphy followed her back there and laid down beside her, his chin resting on his paws, eyes watching the room but making no sound. I grabbed a blanket and knelt down, waiting beside them until the worst of the storm passed. When it was finally just rain, steady and calm, I reached out. Tilly crept forward, eyes wide, until she was close enough for me to pick her up again. I wrapped her in the blanket and carried her to the couch. "You're safe now, okay? That wall doesn't own you anymore." She sighed softly and closed her eyes. That storm marked a shift. Afterward, Tilly started showing signs of memory. Not just learned behaviors, but flashes of emotion that came from somewhere deeper. If we passed the garage on our way to the backyard, she'd pause. Not every time, but often enough to notice. Murphy started stepping in more, nudging her forward, distracting her with a game or a bark. He always seemed to know when to intercept the fear. One morning, while cleaning out the garage, I found something buried behind a stack of old plywood sheets, a plastic storage bin, sealed shut with weathered tape. I hadn't noticed it before, not surprising considering how chaotic everything had been. Inside was a tattered fleece blanket, a chewed-up rubber bone, and a small notebook. The first few pages were lists, feeding schedules, weight logs, commands like heel and down, followed by dates. Then the entries shifted. Day 12. She won't stop crying. I blocked the crawl space. No food until silence. I slammed the notebook shut, fingers trembling. That night, I couldn't sleep. I watched Tilly sleeping soundly, belly up, legs twitching in a dream. Murphy lay beside her like a statue. Everything about them screamed peace. But in my head, I kept replaying those words. No food until silence. The next day, I took the notebook to Deputy Sanders. He read it cover to cover, his jaw tightening. "We can use this," he said. "It supports the timeline, the cruelty. It's good you found it." "I hate that it exists," I muttered. He nodded slowly. "But it's part of what makes this real." and part of what makes your recovery all the more powerful. Recovery. That word stuck with me. Because that's what this was. Not just for Tilly. For all of us. Summer unfolded in long golden afternoons and slow mornings. Tilly continued her training, now working on leash-free walking and responding to whistles. Murphy became her shadow again, then her equal, then finally her playmate. Sometimes I watched them race each other across the backyard, Tilly's long legs finally catching up to her enthusiasm. Other times, I'd catch her sitting still, eyes scanning the yard like she remembered what it felt like to be alone. She was never alone now. In July, we attended a community event at the local shelter. They asked me to speak, to tell the story of how Murphy helped find Tilly, how she'd been rescued, how she was healing. I didn't want to, at first. It felt too raw, too personal. But when I looked down at Tilly sitting at my feet, wagging her tail, I knew I had to. I spoke simply. I told them how Murphy wouldn't stop barking at the wall. How I thought I was imagining the noise, how we pulled her out, how she was barely alive, and how she survived anyway. Tilly stood up and barked once. The crowd clapped. That night, back home, I sat with her on the porch swing and whispered, "You're changing people, kid, just by being here." August brought heat waves and longer walks in the early mornings. One morning, we passed the trailhead near Deer Bridge Creek again. Tilly stopped and looked toward the trees. I let her choose. She stepped onto the path. We walked the full loop. Murphy ahead, Tilly beside me, her gait confident, ears high. When we reached the little stream, she plunged in without hesitation. Splashing. Barking. Tail like a metronome. She was free. At home, I replaced the last old light bulb in the garage with a new LED strip. I wanted every inch of that space to be bright. I hung tools in order, painted the scuffed section of the wall where the crawl space had once been. Tilly followed me in and sniffed the fresh paint. Then she sat down and wagged her tail. Murphy dropped his rope toy by her side. They stayed there a while. It was a quiet declaration. That this space was theirs now. That what came before didn't define what came next. I watched them for a while before joining them on the floor, a calm kind of tired settling into my bones. Outside, the sun dipped behind the trees. Inside, nothing stirred but the rhythm of breathing. 2 dogs. Safe. Home. Whole. By mid-August, Tilly started waking me up before the alarm clock, not with barking or scratching at the door, but with a quiet, deliberate nudge of her nose against my hand, then a wag of her tail and a little hop. It became her routine, and Murphy followed close behind, always slower, more composed, as if letting her take the lead had become part of his identity. It was strange how natural it had all become. A few months ago, I couldn't even imagine living with one dog. Now the thought of not waking up to both of them felt impossible. We had formed a rhythm, a family. We even had our own vocabulary, commands, gestures, tones of voice that meant something to us, even if they didn't translate to anyone else. That morning, after breakfast, I opened the back door and let them into the yard. It had rained lightly the night before, so the grass was soft and damp. Tilly darted out like a bullet, zigzagging and spinning until she rolled herself belly up in a pile of clover. Murphy followed her with a more measured trot, stopping to sniff at the base of the apple tree where squirrels had claimed dominion. After their playtime, I loaded them both into the car. We were heading to the vet for Tilly's 6-month checkup since her rescue. Dr. Gentry had insisted on tracking her progress every few months, not just for her physical health, but also to make sure her nervous system was healing from those early days in the crawl space. The waiting room at the clinic was busy. A large golden doodle panted from the corner. A grumpy terrier barked at everyone who walked past. Tilly sat between Murphy and me, tail twitching lightly but no longer tucked. She was alert, but calm. Dr. Gentry greeted us with her usual warm smile. "Hey there, superstar," she said, scratching Tilly behind the ears. "You've filled out nicely. You look strong. Let's get you checked out." The exam was smooth. Tilly's heart sounded good. Her lungs were clear. Weight was perfect. Teeth looked better. No signs of lingering infections. When it was over, Dr. Gentry leaned back and smiled. "She's thriving," she said. "You've done a remarkable job." Murphy, as if on cue, let out a single bark. "Oh, I know," Dr. Gentry said, laughing. "You helped too." On the way out, a woman in the parking lot stopped to admire them. "They're so well behaved together. Are they siblings?" "No," I said, "but they're family." Back at home, we had lunch on the porch. I gave them each a peanut butter treat and watched as they lounged under the table, paws stretched out, tongues lolling in the late summer heat. That evening, I finally returned to something I'd been putting off: my woodworking projects. For a while before Tilly arrived, I had been building small pieces of furniture in the garage as a hobby, mostly benches, shelves, and the occasional end table. After she was rescued, I hadn't set foot in the garage for more than a few minutes at a time. Now it felt right. The tools were where I left them, covered in a fine layer of dust. I opened the windows, played a little soft music, and started sanding a piece of cedar I'd planned to make into a bench. Murphy laid in the doorway, his eyes half closed, enjoying the breeze. Tilly sniffed every corner of the room, even the freshly painted wall where the crawl space used to be. She didn't pause there this time, just a sniff and a turn, like any other part of the room. I worked for hours, shaping, measuring, reworking a few joints. The sun dipped low, casting golden beams across the sawdust. It felt like balance, like reclaiming something I hadn't realized I'd lost. That night, I dreamed of Tilly again, but not as the trembling, starving puppy in the wall. She was running across an open field, tongue out, ears flapping, Murphy beside her. In the dream, I wasn't following them. I was waiting ahead of them, arms open. The next morning, I made pancakes. It had become something of a tradition every Sunday, and both dogs now recognized the sound of batter sizzling on the skillet. Tilly would sit at the edge of the kitchen with her head tilted, waiting for her tiny, unbuttered portion. Murphy sat next to her, patient as ever. We spent most of that day inside. It was too hot to do much outside, and the humidity clung to the windows like condensation on a glass. I spread a big old quilt across the floor, laid out a few chew toys, and we all sprawled there while I read a novel I hadn't touched in months. Tilly kept putting her head on the book. Murphy snored. I never wanted it to change. That week, I noticed something else. Tilly had begun spending more time alone, but in a good way. Where once she would panic if left in a room without Murphy or me, now she explored the house solo. I'd find her sitting by the window, watching birds, or curled up in a sunny patch by the front door. She was still herself, sweet, high energy, sometimes loud, but the fear had shrunk. It was no longer the foundation of her personality. It was just a layer, fading. Murphy's role was changing too. He'd always been the protector, the big brother. But now, he let her lead during walks. He waited for her cues when they played. It was subtle, but it was there. He wasn't stepping back, just stepping aside. I started planning a small getaway, a cabin rental 2 towns over, just for a weekend. Pet-friendly, secluded, with a nearby lake and trails. We hadn't left town since the rescue, and I wanted to mark the time with something different, something joyful. Packing was an event. Murphy watched with calm curiosity while I folded clothes and loaded a small duffel. Tilly nosed through everything, sneaking off with a sock and getting chased in circles around the kitchen. I packed their beds, bowls, toys, and food. Everything we'd need to make the cabin feel like home. We left early Friday morning. The drive was quiet. Tilly dozed in the back seat beside Murphy, her head resting on his side. The landscape blurred past in greens and browns. Every so often, Murphy sat up to look out the window. The cabin was perfect, simple, with a wide porch and a view of the lake below. Inside was rustic but clean. Wood floors, stone fireplace, a small kitchen. I opened all the windows to let the breeze in. The first thing we did was walk down to the lake. Tilly hesitated at the edge for just a second, then dove right in. Murphy followed. I laughed so hard I had to sit down on the dock and catch my breath. They swam. They rolled in the dirt. They napped in the sun. That evening, I made a small fire in the cabin's outdoor pit. We sat there under the stars, the dogs curled up by my feet. I watched the flames dance and listened to the night sounds. Crickets, wind in the trees, the gentle lapping of water on the shore. I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Not just peace, but possibility. It wasn't over. Tilly's story was still being written. Murphy's too. But it no longer felt like we were just surviving. We were building something new. The next day, we hiked a trail that curved around the edge of the property. Tilly led the way, her nose low, tail high. Murphy stayed close behind, occasionally nudging her from veering too far off path. At the top of the ridge, I stopped and looked back. The lake sparkled below us. The cabin was a dot in the trees. And beside me, 2 lives that had changed mine completely. We stayed there for a while, then headed down together. The day after we returned from the cabin, I noticed Tilly behaving strangely again. Not in the same skittish, fearful way she had after the rescue, but something else. Something alert, purposeful. She kept checking the corners of the house, not like she was scared, but like she was inspecting, like she remembered something. Murphy followed her lead, not anxious, but curious. Wherever she went, he gave her space. Sometimes he'd sit and wait until she was done sniffing a particular wall or climbing behind a chair. Then he'd nudge her forward gently, as if to say, "All right, you've seen it. Time to move on." I watched them for a day before asking Dr. Gentry about it during our next check-in. "She's adapting," she said. "You've created a safe space, and now she's mapping it out fully. That's a good sign. Confidence doesn't always show as play. Sometimes it shows as curiosity." That made sense, but it still stirred something uneasy in me. It got stranger 2 nights later. Tilly woke me up around 2 in the morning. No barking, just her pawing at my arm and then trotting to the top of the stairs. Murphy was already standing by the window. He wasn't growling, but he wasn't relaxed either. I stood up and followed them down. The house was still. Quiet. Tilly went straight to the front door. She sat. Murphy sat beside her. The porch light was already on. Nothing unusual on the cameras. No movement. No shadows. No figure hiding in the trees. But there was a smell. I didn't notice it at first, but when I opened the door to check, it hit me. Smoke. Not heavy. Not burning. more like someone had smoked a cigarette and walked away a few minutes ago. That cold, lingering scent clinging to air. The next morning, I found a small patch of trampled grass by the side of the house. No note, no print, just that sign that someone had stood there. I called Deputy Sanders again. He came right over, walked the perimeter, looked at the footage. Nothing. "I'm not saying it was him," he said, "but people don't just hang around someone's yard at night unless they've got a reason." "Could it be Dale again?" I asked. "I thought he was in custody." "He is. But he's not the only one who might have known about the crawl space. If he told someone, or if someone else was part of what happened with that puppy, we'll look into it." So I added another light. Another camera. I moved a few flower pots to make clearer lines of sight along the fence. Tilly watched me the entire time, head cocked, tail twitching. That night, I slept lightly. Murphy paced twice. Tilly stayed curled at the foot of the bed. No interruptions. No smells. But in the morning, the same patch of grass was trampled again. No sign of entry. No fence breach. Just the unmistakable mark of a presence. I didn't tell many people, just my neighbor Diane, who had always been kind to Murphy, and who brought biscuits over for Tilly every Sunday afternoon. "If you ever need someone to sit outside and keep watch," she said, "I've got 2 retired brothers who would jump at the chance to feel useful again." I laughed, but it helped, just knowing I wasn't completely alone. Still, the dogs picked up on my shift. I tried to act normal, same walk times, same food, same bedtime. But animals know. Murphy stuck closer. Tilly took longer to fall asleep. Even their play sessions became shorter, more cautious. That weekend, I made a new decision. We drove out to the countryside. A local rescue ranch was hosting a public training event, free for dog owners who had rescued or adopted. It wasn't just training. It was connection. Other people, other dogs, other stories. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe proof that Tilly was okay. Maybe a reminder that I was. What I found was a community. The ranch was set on 40 acres of open land, fenced and divided into zones. One for agility, one for socializing, one for relaxation. Trainers walked around offering tips. Owners chatted in folding chairs. Dogs of every size and shape raced through tunnels and climbed obstacles. Tilly stayed near me at first, overwhelmed by the noise. Murphy held position beside her. But slowly, step by step, she moved toward the social zone. A shepherd mix trotted up, sniffed her nose, then darted off. She followed. Before long, she was running, jumping, barking. Not out of fear, but pure energy. I met a couple named Greg and Melissa, who'd rescued a dog from a hoarder's basement. They told me about the first year, how quiet he was, how he didn't understand toys, how he cried when they turned on the vacuum. "He sleeps in the laundry basket now," Melissa said. "By choice. That's where he feels safe. We don't make him move." I nodded. Tilly used to hide behind the couch for weeks. We watched our dogs play in the sun. On the drive home, I looked at them in the rearview mirror. Tilly had her nose out the window. Murphy was lying down, but his tail thumped each time she barked at a passing field. They didn't know about the trampled grass. They didn't know about the note I hadn't mentioned to anyone, another one I found behind the trash can that morning, just 4 words scribbled in pencil on scrap cardboard. "You should have left her." But I wasn't afraid now. I was alert, prepared, and more than anything, surrounded. That night I took an old blanket, laid it across the living room floor, and we all curled up together. I held Tilly close, and Murphy laid his head across both of our legs. We slept like that until dawn. When the sun rose, we took a walk through the neighborhood. Not just for exercise, but to reclaim the space. Every sidewalk, every gate, every street lamp belonged to us now. The scent of someone else's cigarette wouldn't change that. Neither would a note. The only thing that mattered was the path ahead, and Tilly was leading the way, tail high, eyes forward, ready to keep going. We followed her without hesitation. 3 days after finding the cardboard note behind the trash can, something changed in the air. It wasn't something I could explain clearly, not something I could see or touch, but it pressed at my chest with every step I took. Murphy picked up on it first. That afternoon, while I was bringing groceries in through the front door, he stood motionless by the window, ears locked forward, tail low. I followed his gaze, but saw nothing. Tilly, too, began pacing. She didn't bark. She just kept circling the living room, pausing by the back door and then the hallway, as if waiting for something to appear. I closed all the blinds and doors, double-checked the locks, and poured myself a glass of water that I never ended up drinking. At dusk, I brought the dogs out into the backyard. Tilly sniffed around the hydrangea bushes like she usually did, then looked up sharply and growled. Murphy came to her side immediately. They stood still, facing the back fence. It was too dark to see beyond the trees, but I trusted their instincts more than my eyes. I called them back inside and locked the door. That night, I slept with the hallway light on. At 3:13 a.m., the motion sensor on the side of the house went off. It chimed once, then again. I sat up in bed and quietly reached for the baseball bat I kept under the nightstand. Murphy was already standing. Tilly, though half asleep, began to growl. I made my way to the side window and peeked through the curtain. Nothing at first. Then movement, a figure crouched by the shed. My stomach dropped. I called the sheriff's office on speakerphone. "Yes, it's me again. Someone's in my yard. Yes, the same house. He's at the shed." While I waited for the dispatcher to confirm help was coming, I moved into the living room. Murphy and Tilly followed, both silent now, muscles tight. I turned on the porch lights. Bright floodlights cut through the dark. The figure flinched. For the first time, I saw his face, thin, pale, framed by a hood. He looked straight into the camera above the porch, and then he ran. Deputy Sanders arrived within 15 minutes. The figure was gone by then, but the camera had captured enough. This time, they had his face clearly. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. In the morning, Sanders called. "It's a man named Brian Gorman. Served time with Dale Kettering. Lived 2 blocks away until 6 months ago. We think Dale might have told him about the house, maybe even asked him to finish what he started. He's got a record. We're bringing him in." I sat down hard on the porch steps after that call. Not because I was afraid, though I was, but because it confirmed everything. Tilly hadn't been left behind randomly. Dale had shared the location. Others knew. Maybe not many. Maybe not anymore. But it wasn't just one broken man. It was a plan. But the plan failed. Tilly had lived. That week, I made one final change to the house. I built a fence within the fence, a smaller, secured run in the center of the backyard, reinforced with a gate I could lock from inside the house. It wasn't just about protection. It was about giving Murphy and Tilly space to play without me scanning the tree line every few minutes. Tilly took to the new enclosure immediately. She ran in wide circles, chasing a ball, barking into the breeze. Murphy followed close behind her, letting her lead like always. Later that day, Dr. Gentry came by for a house visit. She hadn't seen them in person in a few weeks, and she gasped when she stepped into the yard. "Is that the same Tilly who couldn't make it up 2 stairs without collapsing?" "The very one," I said, smiling. She knelt and opened her arms. Tilly trotted over and dropped a soggy tennis ball into her hands. After the visit, we sat on the porch while the dogs rested in the grass. "You know," she said, "I've seen a lot of recovery. But I've never seen this, not like this." Murphy saved her. She shook her head. "You all saved each other." In the following weeks, life began to look more ordinary. The last note was burned. The extra patrols stopped. The grass grew over the trampled patch near the fence. Summer gave way to the cooler winds of early fall. The leaves began turning, and the air in the mornings had that slight bite that made the dogs bark just a little louder when we stepped outside. On a cool Saturday, we drove to a small orchard a few towns over. They allowed dogs and set up a fall festival with pumpkin patches and apple cider stands. Tilly wore a harness with little leaves embroidered on it. Murphy wore his same sturdy collar. Dozens of people asked to pet them. Some recognized us from the rescue fundraiser. Others just smiled at the sight of 2 happy dogs sitting at a picnic table like they belonged there. At one point, a boy around 8 years old came over holding a half-eaten apple. He reached out to Tilly, who sniffed him once, and then gently licked his hand. The boy grinned. "She likes me." I nodded. "She has excellent taste." Murphy, not to be left out, leaned forward and bumped the boy's arm gently, earning a laugh. We stayed until the sun dipped low behind the trees. Back home, I lit a small fire in the hearth and laid out the quilt on the floor. Murphy flopped down first. Tilly curled up beside him and fell asleep before the fire even settled. That night, I looked around the room and tried to remember what it had felt like before they were here. The silence, the space, the empty corners. It was like trying to remember life before you could walk or talk. I knew it existed, but it didn't feel real anymore. In the days that followed, Tilly hit new milestones. She barked at the mailman without backing away. She climbed the hill in the park that she used to avoid. She let strangers pet her without hiding behind Murphy. One morning, while making breakfast, I turned around and saw her sitting in the hallway, watching me with calm eyes and ears forward. She wasn't begging. She wasn't anxious. She was just watching. Part of the morning like the smell of toast and the sound of birds. Murphy walked past her, bumped her with his hip playfully, and she stood to chase him. And I realized she was whole. Not perfect, not flawless, but whole. The scars from that crawl space might always be there. The memory of the wall, the sound of distant thunder, the flash of a hood in the dark. But they no longer owned her. She had carved her own place in the world. She had barked it into existence. She had wagged it into motion. One night, I dreamed again. Not about danger, not about notes or fences or crawl spaces. I dreamed of a trail winding through golden woods. Tilly ran ahead, Murphy beside her. Leaves fell around us, and I was laughing. When I woke up, both dogs were on the bed. Murphy at my feet, Tilly by my side, her paw resting gently against my arm. I didn't move for a long time, because everything I'd ever needed was already here,